There's still a lot of real terrible leadership. I've been a great leader. I've also been a terrible leader, often both at the same time.
When I worked in Subway, I was a supervisor in the store. And then you realise quite quickly how, that you can't be a dick or else nobody does anything.
Where you are is where you are. That's the absolute. What needs to happen for me to be able to have the level of focus required to get into that flow state?
If you feel that like a couple times in your life, you react easily.
I'm a leadership development specialist. I guarantee that when I am in a position to employ people, I will get it wrong.
I think it's so easy for a toxic environment to take root in a workplace when, there is a manager or a leader like that and people leave.
Because I know how the mind works. You've got their best interests at heart, that you're trying your best, they'll forgive you.
Hello and welcome to another episode of TED Talks. This week with us, Andy Nisevic, and we're going to talk about the personal development and how is it important for every entrepreneur. Hi Andy, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for asking. How are you guys?
I'm good. How are you?
I was fine until you gave me a caffeine-free, sugar-free Coke.
Well, it's good for you.
It's good for me, yeah. I'm obviously the
It's not
pinnacle of male
generally
physique.
good. It's not really good, but it's good for you.
It's better. So, Andy, introduce yourself. Who the devil are you, and how did you end up on our podcast?
So, Andy Nisevic, I run a business called 1 Degree Training and Coaching. We are leadership development specialists. And I'm here because one of your previous guests is a client of mine, Bjorn Bojan, and you asked him a question related to the experience of going from being a business owner to an employee and having leadership responsibility within an organisation. You asked him, what tips would you give? And he said, hire Andy Nisevic. And that made me smile massively, as you can imagine, when I saw it. So I got in touch and said, hi, I'm the guy that Bjorn recommended. And here we are.
Yeah, okay. And how did you get into it? We like to start by, because pretty much everyone we have on here is a business owner, so we want to find out, how did it start? And I know you're in the RAF. You were in the RAF for 23 years.
23
with
years,
12
yeah.
postings.
12 postings, 8 operational deployments, yeah.
And you posted a lot about your stuff on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I've been able to find out a lot about you.
Oh, that's
You're a very
isn't it?
stereotypical middle child, and you said that.
Yes, I did. Yeah,
that's not me. You became a dad at 23.
Yep. You're reading one of my slides.
I'm reading one of your slides.
Yeah.
So how did you end up from being in the RAF to, specialising in leadership?
23 years in the RAF, I've worn pretty much every non-commissioned rank there is to wear. So I've promoted several times, and with each promotion comes leadership development training that you have within the RAF. And it's, biased opinion, it's probably some of the best training you'll receive in the world. So the material that we get taught, the way that it gets taught is seconds to none. It's world class. So that kind of contributed to my own personal development within leadership. But you know what? The truth is that despite the best training in the world, and there are a lot of other world-class trainers out there, there's still a lot of real terrible leadership. I've been a great leader. I've also been a terrible leader, often both at the same time, because what works for one person won't work for another person. So that's something that I never really understood until later on in my career, when I was lucky enough to be one of the people teaching the RAF's leadership and management courses. And yeah, like I said, I feel that the training there is the best in the world, but I was hearing so many stories of really horrible, terrible leadership, and I just couldn't contextualize why we provided this fantastic training. Why weren't everybody fantastic leaders? And I struggled with that, and I did a lot of self-development within that area. I became a massive geek on human psychology, leadership psychology, behavioral psychology, but also neuroscience, about how the brain learns. And what I realized was that training isn't enough. It's one step for leadership development, but it's not even the first step. So it requires far more than just that. So I decided to leave the RAF because, like I said, 12 postings, 8 deployments. I was just sick and tired of not being able to settle anywhere, not allowing the grass to grow. And I decided that I loved being a leadership trainer. It's one of my best jobs I've ever had. I was offered jobs by 3 corporate providers, but it was very much, there's your slide pack, there's your script, go do that. And it doesn't work, it's not enough. And so I had this philosophy that I was building within my mind about how to do it properly, and it's more of a holistic approach that combines training with mentoring, with coaching, with teamwork, with psychometric assessments to create this holistic approach. And touch wood, so far the concept is proving to be working very, very well.
Okay, and so what was your first couple of roles in the RAF, and how your almost progression into coaching on the leadership courses? How did that happen?
It's a great question. It was quite accidental, to be honest. So I joined in 1999. I was the last in the intake of the previous century, which is something, I suppose. Graduated just before Christmas from recruit training, and then 2000 was the first few months was trade training. My first operational role was a unit that's now closed. It was called RAF T+Ed, just outside Norwich in the Norfolk Broads. And that was just doing the surveillance of the UK airspace. So my operational trade title was Air and Space Systems. Well, back then I was an operator. By the time I left, I was a manager. And yeah, my trade in those kind of operational roles were responsible for surveillance of the UK. My first step towards leadership really came maybe about 18 months later when I took a role within the unit's training squadron. And that might not necessarily sound exactly like leadership, but if we consider what leadership is that ability to provide influence, inspiration, motivate people, to develop people. It's actually got nothing to do with the rank or the position that you hold. It's not an authoritarian position. It's just that ability to help people to become better than they were yesterday. So a trainer, irrespective of what kind of level they're at in the organisation, a trainer has some real leadership responsibility on their shoulders. Unfortunately, I didn't know that at the time, so that's one of the examples where my leadership maybe wasn't so great, and maybe a little bit of ego was there because, yeah, I'm a trainer, I must be great, and things like that. Fortunately, through getting promoted, applying, attending the courses, those skills started to become nurtured.
Okay. And
What do you mean when leadership wasn't great? Can you give us examples? For example, at that point in your position?
So a great example, and I've shared this in a talk I gave recently. I was responsible for a course, graduates from trade training, their first operational tour, and so my job was to get them to the operational performance standard. They were 4 lads, very cocky, cocksure, very confident, stereotypical young lads who had their whole career ahead of them. And because although the rank structure was, I was what's known as a senior aircraftsman, and they were what's known as a leading aircraftsman. So I was slightly senior to them, but it's a time promotion, so it's not really that seniority. But I did have responsibility for them. I was responsible for making sure that they attended the right training. But one of them in particular was a little bit older than me and maybe had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder about being told what to do by somebody younger than him. I didn't respond to that very well, so I was very much ego-driven. I'm the responsible person here, do what I say. And there was one example where I told them to be somewhere at a particular time, and they didn't turn up. So the corporals, so they're in civilian equivalent, that's kind of like team leader rank. So they're the ones with real authority rather than me who just thought that he did. They were saying, right, okay, we'll deal with it. And me being young, ambitious, cocksure myself, I thought, no, it's my responsibility. I'll go and deal with it. So I went to try and do that stereotypical, what you expect military leadership to be, the stuff that you see in the movies and TV shows, are very rah-rah, very direct, kind of hard leadership. And when I think about that, I'm picturing them in their faces in my head right now. It's just a combination of confusion and humour, because I think I scared myself more than I actually scared them. And the reason for that is I was trying to be somebody I wasn't. I was trying to be this shouty, scary type military person, and to be honest, that's bullshit. Even people in the military who have seniority and rank behind them, if they're worth their salt, they don't operate like that. That's not how human beings are motivated. That's very much movie stuff. The real world is very different. Now, don't get me wrong, you have to have that ability in the military to be that person. When the metaphorical shit hits the fan, you need to be able to get people to respond very, very quickly and have discipline and follow orders. But 99% out of the time, it's just routine activity, and human beings are human beings, and they don't get motivated by getting shouted at and sworn at and told certain words. So yeah, I was trying to be somebody I wasn't. I was trying to emulate this kind of perceived idea of what a military leader should be, and I was wrong, and I got it very, very wrong. And fortunately, I had some very good corporals there at the time that were able to clean up my mess for me and tell me how I was doing it wrong. And kind of that was my first exposure to a bit of development as a leader, a bit of mentoring by some experienced people.
Okay, and I don't really want to labour the point and get into the nitty-gritty of leadership here until we've kind of completed your journey, but just how important is it in leadership to be, like you said, to be genuine and to be yourself?
Well, the subconscious, in the human brain, the subconscious is one of the most perceptible, let's call it a being. Professor Steve Peters calls it a chimp, or certainly where the chimp exists is within the subconscious. But it's an extremely perceptive part of the brain. It's able to read other people far better than the conscious mind can. So if you're trying to be somebody you're not, trying to emulate somebody because you think that that's the right way, that they're good at what they do, so let's try and be them, the other person can sense that. It's very, very easy. They might not consciously be aware of it, but that feeling of something's not quite right will be within them, and that just brings that trust right down. However, if we're being ourselves, it doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter what our drivers are, what our motivators are, the kind of person that we are. We just need to be ourselves, because people will read that, and they'll be able to then make a decision whether they like you or they don't. But they'll be able to trust that you're being yourself. So like and trust, so long as you've got the right people that the same similar sort of values to you, that like and trust then gets accelerated, and you've got a better foundation to build that from.
Yeah, I think that's something I was really conscious of. I think as soon as I started understanding that, in business I did have something to offer and had that confidence as part of my initial startup journey, so there are a lot of agency owners, a lot of people we cross paths with, and then I was thinking, I needed to be different. I needed to be, I'm a really casual.
Different from what? From other agencies?
Yeah.
As an employee or for clients?
As a leader. Not as a leader in the leadership sense, but as the owner of a company. I needed to be a different way. I needed to be more serious. I needed to be more formal. I needed to go in with the blazer.
Yeah.
But now it doesn't really matter who the client is. I feel confident enough in myself that I could turn up in this. I normally wear a shirt to work. I normally dress like a dad, is how I describe myself, to be honest. But I feel confident enough in me as a person that I can just go, and if you don't like that I've turned up in the hoodie and you're all wearing suits, then that's fine. Because at some point I'm going to turn up in a hoodie. So you may as well not like it the first time than five meetings down the road.
Do you have experience before business? Do you have work on a more or less senior position?
No.
Where you have a team or someone? Because I think this is quite challenging, because I have opposite.
So when I worked in Subway, I was a supervisor in the store. So I was managing other people.
Yeah.
And then you realise quite quickly how, that you can't be a dick or else nobody does anything. But never super serious roles. So my only roles before starting the agency were working in Domino's, where I was eating pizza all the time and getting fat. Working in Subway, where I was eating sandwiches all the time and getting fat, and working in construction, where I was getting bullied for being fat. That was my career journey?
Yeah, I have different. I have straight from university. I started to work in BMW
Sure.
in PR, and I was project manager, who was responsible for events, presentation, and I have a team of people, about 20. And the thing is, they was very qualified professionals who obviously hired by BMW HRs, and they all know what they're doing. And then me, who have basically no work experience, just get on the senior position, younger than them.
Yep.
And they work in there for years, and I just get there, have bigger salary than them, doing less work than them, well, in their opinion. And it was challenging to find a way to communicate, like build up trust with them.
And both examples bring a hell of a lot of their own challenges. So, Edgar, your point, it's very, very similar to officer recruitment in the military. So somebody leaves university, they might be, let's say, on average, 21, 22. They'll join the military, whichever branch of the military that is. They'll do their however long their officer cadet training plus the branch training that they do, and then they're in their early to mid 20s with a very senior position that is technically more senior to people that have got 20, 30, sometimes pushing 40 years worth of experience, and they hold this leadership responsibility for them. So what you were describing, executive recruitment within civilian work, it's exactly the same. And yeah, it can be, and I've seen some people, fortunately, that have done it brilliantly. I've seen some people that have done it terribly. And what I quite often find is those people that are able to recognise the importance of humility tends to do far better, because you might have academic qualifications, which are really important, but that practical hands-on experience teaches you so much more. So having that humility and recognizing that you don't have the practical experience of those people with the decades of experience behind them, and recognizing that and going to them cap in hand saying, what do you think? What are your ideas? What does your experience taught us? What have you tried before that's either worked really well, that hasn't worked? Why hasn't it worked? And rather than being that person that comes in, this is what we're doing because I read a book 5 years ago that said this is the right thing to do. That those people that have that humility within them do far better and generate that trust and the rapport that's needed for the right environment for people to thrive in.
So for me, the way I found, well, a lot of people tell me I'm doing it wrong, but I was involved in any jobs they doing myself as well. Yeah. So, for example, when we have no time to, like when my technicians washing the cars and I see we behind, I would take out like the things and just start to help them wash the car, and basically with catering, with all the stuff, was helping them out, not only just tell them, do it faster, we'd have no time. And my senior officer, he was telling me that that bad manager doing work himself.
Okay, there's two trains of thought with that, really. It's I know lots and lots of people that will agree with your manager and say, yeah, it was absolutely right, you should not be doing that. I know lots of people that would say, actually, that's exactly the right thing to do, showing that willingness to muck in with the junior staff and getting your hands dirty. Actually, there is no right or wrong, because it's the judgment in the moment. Now, to support the people who say it was the wrong thing to do, is actually that your job, you're being paid to look from a different perspective. So what is it that's needed, what are the other tasks or the other responsibilities that you've got that you're not doing by mucking in? However, there's also the other perspective, is actually if you're coming to the end of a project and, like you say, you're running out of time, things need to happen quickly, and although that kind of strategic or those operational considerations, they're taken care of, and because let's face it, you don't always need to be behind a computer answering emails or in meetings and things like that. If that's taken care of and the guys are under the cosh, go and help them out. So there's a lot of nuance and context that's required to actually be able to. There's no black and white when it comes to that.
What a bloody politician! Did you hear that?
Well, at this point, that's helped me, like, because I was doing that. I get a really good relationship with all the team, and We have and I was taking all responsibility always on me. So for example, if we was late, I wasn't tell them, oh, they was not washing cars. I was just standing and listening all myself.
So a lot of business coaches will talk about the 10, 100 and 1,000 pound tasks that exist within. Now, to take the cleaning the car example, that's a £10 task. It's a task that's not going to make the business any money, but still needs to be done. Your job as a kind of I'm assuming mid-level manager at that time, your job is probably the £100 tasks that they don't make new money, but it means that the existing clients that are coming in are satisfied, and you maintain those relationships with other clients. So by doing the £10 tasks yourself, what are you not doing when those £100 tasks are not being done? Now, there's a reason why they're 10, 100 and £1,000 tasks. £10 tasks, they're always there. They always need to be done. It's kind of that non-stop work that keeps the business running. The £100 tasks, they're fairly regular. It's delivering what the customers require of you, what they've paid for, and making sure they're serviced. But it's not 100% of the time. So, for example, my clients don't have my undivided attention 100% of the time, because otherwise I'd never run. The business would fail because I haven't got anybody else to do the £10 task. And those £1,000 tasks, that's your kind of high strategic level stuff that's going to be bringing in the business in the next 6, 12, 18 months. But again, a lot of that is getting stuff in the diary, meeting people, and that means that you've got to actually meet other people's time. So then again, they're not happening all the time. So if you've satisfied those £1,000 tasks, if those £100 tasks are satisfied, and the people who are responsible for the £10 tasks need some help, then just go and help them. But if
you were saying about politician?
Yeah, I think there's an election coming up. I'd vote for you.
But if those £100 tasks or those £1,000 tasks, if they're not being done because you're spending your time doing those £10 tasks, and then actually you are failing the business because you're not doing what you're getting paid to do. So there's judgment that needs to be applied.
Yeah. I think that when I stopped work and started to have business, that's when problems start, because I get all this background knowing having the managing skills, and especially when I started to hire freelancers or whoever I can afford, I face the thing that I expect them to be, as in my experience, real qualified, real experienced people, and they not, and it's require much more kind of give them task and plan their work myself, but I didn't do before, because I was think this is common sense, you should understand what to do, but then they not, and it just giving me big problems to managing people when they're not senior, good payable, experienced.
So let's take the example of somebody that's just come out of university. Let's say they've done you're in the creative industry. Let's say they've done a graphic design degree.
They're all shit. All of them.
Oh, that's a sweeping statement, isn't
it? Don't do the graphic design degree. Watch YouTube tutorials for 3 years. You'll be insane.
Okay, good tip. Thank you.
Do a degree that you like and enjoy, but just do the YouTube stuff.
What if they enjoy
what if they enjoy the graphic design degree?
Then make sure you still do 3 years of YouTube. It's more important.
Fair.
Sorry, there's my sweeping statement.
There's your sweeping statement and the point to make. So there's obviously experience that you've got with people that have come out of university with a graphic design that haven't necessarily got the skills to do what's required, because they haven't been spending the last 3 years watching YouTube or actually doing the work. But they've got a degree, so there's a level of expectation that they've had that higher level education, that they should know what to do. But what they haven't got is that practical experience of somebody who's whether they've got the academic qualifications, but they've got that first-hand experience. Is that first-hand experience is quite often the key of what is it the client wants, what's the creative process that's required to go into it, what's the design requirements, what's the level of perfection that might need to be more, or is it actually what they want is something raw and completely unperfect, but something that just sits and grabs attention. you don't know that when you've just come out of university, because you're satisfying certain requirements of academia, rather than a client wants something kind of drastic and point making and maybe kind of raw and controversial. You might not have experienced that because that's not a requirement of the modules that you did. So that ongoing mentoring has to be part and parcel of your process, your onboarding structure when you're bringing people into the business.
And what if you have not bringing them for permanent positions, and you just need to spend 1-2 weeks on one project,
So
and you
for a freelance,
have no time to
yeah.
make adjustments to teach him your ways.
Then just accept. Just accept that that it's not going to be done your way, but does that mean it's wrong?
Yes.
Not perfect.
No, I think it's difficult, isn't it? Especially on the short-term projects, because often you've either already paid somebody for all of it or at least half of it, and you're kind of stuck with what you've got.
And you have no influence on these people usually, because if you don't like them, they basically don't care. And if you say your work is shit, and he'll say like, okay, and just will stop responding or something like that. And you're still stuck in the middle of project. It's halfway work done. Like you can't fire him.
Sounds
you don't
like
care.
leadership.
I mean,
What do you think to that, Andy? Saying your work is shit.
Well, some people will respond brilliantly to it. Some people love that raw honesty. Other people will absolutely get destroyed by it. And that's where the benefit of having permanent staff outweighs the benefits of having temporary staff, because you get to learn how people respond. When you're only working with somebody for a short-term project, then you don't have that benefit. And so sometimes, like I say, just being yourself and just being honest as to who you are and what your thoughts are, maybe that's the best thing. Maybe being as blunt as "you're shit" might not be the best. Maybe this isn't the standard that I was expecting.
Very bad. You know what? Look at what you've done.
Yeah.
It is really bad.
Yeah,
You should consider.
one good thing about that work you've just done.
I should consider to find another job.
Yeah,
but that's the thing, especially when it comes to the creative. What's terrible to you might be brilliant to somebody else.
I agree.
So they're from the way that they work or the people that they've worked for before, this is exactly what they need. So they've created this bias within them that this is what people want.
I think it's it's not really a leadership point at all, but I think it's something that I notice a lot is when someone will have done some work and you think it's 6 out of 10, and then they send it to the client and you're a bit like, oh no, I should have looked at that. But autonomy, so yeah, sure, send it to the client. And the client's like, yeah, that's great, thanks. And you're like, oh my God, some other agency owner's going to see that and think all the work we do is shit. But yeah, that was just another point. I don't know.
So you're just accepting it, or I see.
Well, and then the client's like, yeah, sure, thank you very much.
So that autonomy, what you're talking about, is empowerment of people to be able to take responsibility. But empowerment is actually a really, really hard thing to get right. It sounds easy, doesn't it? Just allow somebody to take responsibility. But often when we're empowering somebody, it's because we're giving them a set of responsibility that they're not used to, that they've never experienced before. So they don't know what they don't know. So actually, when you first start empowering somebody, there needs to be boundaries. There needs to be agreed check-in periods. There needs to be you can operate within this kind of area. And then as their experience grows, those boundaries become looser and the area that they can operate within becomes wider until you build up the mutual trust, because trust is two-way. That yes, you have to build an environment where they can trust you, but it's incumbent upon them to be trustworthy as well. So proper empowerment is a hard thing to get right, and it's a hard thing to do. Early days, it requires some boundaries, some clearly defined. That person knows exactly where they can operate within, and then just gradual expansion of those boundaries and more freedom until they get to the position where you can say, you've got 100% ownership of this, you liaise with the client, you do the work, I'll just sit back.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point and something that, I'd not really thought of before.
it's common because empowerment, by definition, empowerment is empowering other people to be themselves, to take ownership, to take responsibility. So within the pure definition, it leads people to think, okay, I'll just empower. That's your responsibility. But it often goes wrong because then when you see the work not being done to the right standard, as the responsible person, because you can delegate authority to complete a task, you can't delegate the responsibility for it being completed. So as the responsible person, you start getting nervous. You start thinking, oh, that's not right. That's not what I asked for. That's not good enough. And then you start coming in and you start micromanaging because you haven't set those agreed boundaries in the beginning, the agreed check-in periods and actually how much autonomy that they've got.
Yeah, I think what you say, the having check-in periods, it's really help in these cases, especially with freelancers. Like when you see in the middle what they're doing, so you kind of have still time to change the direction, give some direction to them. So what's going wrong before they finished. But yeah, that's why I probably don't like the remote freelancers work and remote work in general, because I have no access to what they're doing, or if they doing something, or just leaving everything till last moment.
Yeah. I think it's probably harder with video as well because the files are so big that you can't really just pop it back. Just pop it here, let me just fiddle with that and I'll send you it back. But it's something that, I've only just started getting those boundaries now. I've been working with remote freelancers, fully remote freelancers for years. I think there's one guy that's been with me 2.5 years, never come to the office. And it's difficult because you often give someone the work and then kind of forget about it until the work comes back, and then all of a sudden it's 6 hours in and it's not what you wanted. So it's
using a lot of software for it to see all the check up points.
So we use project management software to see roughly where a project's in place, but you can only see is something in progress or not. You can't see did you add space on the left hand side, did you change the color?
But same time you work with these people for long term, so you kind of know what to expect from them.
Yes and no. The problem with designers, I think, is that everyone has a style, which means when a new client comes out, or they're slotting into a project that they haven't worked on before, or you just need some help quick on something that they've not taken ownership of. It makes it really difficult because, especially on new projects. So, for instance, at the moment, me and Edgar are working on a care home together. So he's doing the video for us. We're doing all the design, but that stuff's all new. So, and you're we share the same vision, I think, for the client, but that's something that's to start with anyway, just inside my head until it starts coming out, and then everyone else can look at the wall of stuff we've done and go, I get it. But I think until someone's on board with a vision, it's really difficult for them to nail things first time, and you can often find that there's just wasted cash, and cash is bleeding. And we went through from April-ish this year to maybe June. We just had some really terrible months where we weren't getting any new big projects in. We'd sort of wrapped up the last bunch, so we got paid, but then the cash was just dwindling, and we didn't have enough retainers in the business then to completely cover our costs. So the bank account, a small amount every month, was just going down and down and down. I was thinking, oh my God. So I think it was something Bjorn said either on the podcast or when we went to the pub after the podcast. We're not doing that today, it's too early.
Unfortunately, I've got clients, but yeah.
But he said it's what you do.
Days wasted.
He said it's what you do in the troughs that set you up for the peaks, when you have the peaks and troughs. And one of those things, I'm really labouring the point, I know, but one of the things I did there was I set boundaries with freelancers, and I said, look, I expect this to take 3 hours. After 1 hour, show me what you've got. Yeah. Because that means if I'm paying a freelancer, so the regular freelancers, depending on their experience, they're paid kind of £15 an hour, £12.50, £15 an hour, but they get work every day. So it's kind of, stability for them. The good freelancers will tear my arm off, but sometimes we need them for specialist projects. But yeah, it just saves £30 a time if they screw it up. So it adds up.
It really does. And what I like there is that you've learnt from the past. So saying, right, I think this will take 3 hours worth of work. Check in after an hour. Check in after another hour. And that what that allows you to do is, one, see, okay, is their skill what you need them to be? Because after an hour, a 3 hour, you expect them to be a third of the way through the project. If they're barely 10%, then you might think, okay, I might have lost 15 quid here. It's probably better that I go to somewhere else because this person hasn't got the skill that I need them to be. It's quite a cutthroat way of doing it, but when you're a small business and cash flow is an issue, then you kind of have to make those kind of decisions. And this is where I talk about the trust being two-way, because that freelancer has always got the ability to say, actually, I think this might take 5 hours to do for whatever reason. And then you have that conversation right at the beginning, and it saves those problems later on down the line. Because you might hear what he got to say and say, okay, what I agree, maybe for my experience, my skill level, it might take me, but let's look at where you are in your career at the moment. And I accept that I would do it faster than you would do it. So yeah, there is space within the budget to fund 5 hours worth of work, but I still want you to check in after every hour of work so I can see the progress that's being made. And that's a way of dealing with those problems right at the start, rather than getting to the end and them wanting to pay you 60 quid and you're only willing to pay 45 quid, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the kind of relationship I have with these guys as well is that, I kind of almost put the food on the table because this is their regular work. Yeah. They have better paying stuff that they do and fit around it, but this is their baseline. I was going to say baseline, but then I also thought of base load, like for the electric grid, that amount that's, always there. So it's base load or baseline. So
is it harder? Well, in my experience, it's much harder with creative to predict how fast they will finish their work, because it's a creative work. Some days it can take 1 hour, but then the other week he will be depressed and each simple task will take 5 hours.
Yeah,
and it's hard to predict something like that.
And it is, and you can't get it right, and I'm aware of that as well. So, for instance, the last couple of days I've worked 2 full days and I've done about a third of a website page. Adam, who's spectating this podcast, has been working on a website for himself, well, for one of his clients. He's done like 3 pages. 3 pages? Give or take 3 pages. But that's the same amount of, different levels. I got more experience, so I've seen different ways to do it. I should be faster. I've done a tenth of what he's done because I've hit that wall. So I'm aware that it exists, but I think what Andy was kind of saying is that by giving people almost, you're giving them freedom, but putting some gates in place, then while you might not get it right every time, at least you have some kind of precaution so that in that situation, while you think it might take 6 and it actually takes 10, it's not going to take 60.
Know that.
Correct, yeah.
Well, at least you know that, because if you, how you say, do the checkpoints, and you will realize in 2 hours that he not done anything yet.
Yeah.
So you need to kind of find another one and help him out.
Yeah, because the word that you used there, Tommy, was I should be further ahead of where I am. Now, should is one of the most dangerous words in the English language. It has its place, but when it's used...
I'm getting cancelled live on my own podcast.
But when it's used as a general word, it comes from a place of judgment, it comes from a place of bias. As human beings, sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down. That's just the way of things. So sometimes you'll be absolutely right. You'll be able to be where you should be quite easily, often further ahead, because you're on top of it. You're in flow. There's nothing distracting you. Other times you've got things that just naturally distract you. You might have things going on in other projects or at home that just reduce that energy and your capacity to work to your optimum level. So when we say it should take this amount of time, actually what we're doing is we're classing that on our kind of optimum level. So we're always working against ourselves, because we're saying, oh, I should be done by now. I should actually, where you are is where you are. That's the absolute. So rather than, oh, I should be there and chastising yourself or chastising other people, it's okay, what needs to happen for me to be able to have the level of focus required to get into that flow state?
It's a hard question.
It's a hard question because it's going to be different for everybody.
Creative people, drugs. Drugs.
No comments.
You're not tolerated. It's all on you.
Yeah. So again, going back to that freelance scenario, this should take 3 hours to complete. You're based on your level of experience, what you've done in the past, your perspective. It doesn't take into consideration what their level of skill is, what their experience is, what's going on in their world, what other kind of pressures and strains that they're under. So it might actually cause somebody to rush the work to get it done in 3 hours, but actually becomes very bad quality work because they've rushed it rather than taking the time. Whereas if that conversation was open, like I said earlier, about, well, actually, I've got this going on, I've got that going on, it's probably going to take me 5 hours to complete. You could either make the decision, yes, I've got that within the budget, is fine, or you can make the decision and say, no, the budget is so tight, I don't have that extra 30 quid's worth of wiggle room. That was easy to say.
Yeah. Wiggle womb. That's
wiggle
a
womb.
midwife term.
Yeah. I'll move on. We'll move on to somebody else. But what it means is that ability for you to be honest with them, but them to be honest with you. It generates a little bit of trust. Whereas somebody who just goes away, rushes a bit of work, comes back, and it's poor quality work, you're going to have to pay somebody else to do it. It's going to cost a lot more. But somebody comes back and says, actually, no, I can't complete that within the time. That person has been honest with you, which subconsciously means there's that level of trust being built. So whereas poor quality work will mean I'm not going to that person again, I can't trust them, being honest and upfront means actually you've got that a baseline of trust with that person, a little bit of respect, and it becomes mutual because you've given them the opportunity to have a say, and they've given you the opportunity to make a decision.
Yeah, and I think we have quite a lot of creatives that listen to the podcast, but a lot of business owners in general.
A lot.
There's 4 of them. And thanks for staying till this long, by the way.
I just punched the
You just punched the microphone. That's 3. One of them's just gone down. What would be your tips for a business owner or manager or a leader, whoever it is, to try and manage that friction? Because a lot of what we do is kind of time sensitive because we don't have an unlimited budget, so we are trading it for time. Yeah. We're not selling products. How do you manage the need for something to be done within 5 hours, let's say, but also you don't want to give them the pressure so that you're kind of killing the creativity and just generally giving them a pretty shitty place to come and work? How do you manage that and navigate that conversation?
Quite often the trick is actually the opposite of what most people do, or certainly what I've seen most people do. The trick is to lean into it. Just have that awkward conversation. What's going on? What are the expectations? What are the needs? Why is the need for it to be done so quickly? What is the knock-on effect if it's not done within that timescale? What is it that's going on that person can't meet those expectations? If they're freelancers, again, it's quite cutthroat, and I don't like being as blunt as this, but if they're freelancers, it makes it a relatively easy decision, because if they can't meet those timelines with the quality that they need, then you can just move on to somebody else. If they're an employee and you've got one employee doing that specific job, then it becomes much harder because you can't just move on to somebody else because you're still paying this person to do a job. But that's where you've got to really lean into just developing that trust as quickly as possible, because it's only when that trust is mutual, you can trust them, they can trust you, that they'll be able to come to you before there's a problem and just, hey, Edgar, hey, Tommy, I've got this going on. I might need some, as in the personal development world, it's called reasonable adjustments. People probably aren't going to phrase it like that, but they might come to you and say, I need some help. Now, reasonable adjustments doesn't mean that you just do absolutely everything that person asks for, because that often then becomes unreasonable and unsustainable. But being able to recognize where you might be able to step in and take some of their responsibility off their shoulders, or if you can subcontract an element out to allow them to do that. Actually, what you get from that investment over the long term significantly outweighs the short-term cost, because they feel valued, they feel engaged, they feel fulfilled, they're doing work that they love, they're working for people that will help them out, and actually you get that paid back in spades, but it might just take a little bit of short-term pain, especially if because the law of the sod's law says it's going to happen when you're under the cosh. But that might mean that as the manager, as the leader, the employer, whatever level that you're at, taking that little bit of short-term pain, putting some extra work in yourself, or subcontracting a bit of work out to cover that skills shortage, what you get in the long term, massively, it becomes beneficial.
Okay. To slightly change up where we are, because I'm eager to hear the, I said earlier, I don't want to talk about leadership now, but we just went there because it was interesting. How did you left the RAF, and I just want to get this in because I want to know, and as soon as you walk off to your next meeting after this, I'm going to forget to ask you.
Sure.
So how did you transition from the RAF into your own business?
Even being military, going to civil sector.
So one thing that stood out is in the military, we've got this kind of ego-based perspective that we're a different type of person. It's nonsense. We're not. We recruit from exactly the same pool as everybody else in the world recruits from. We're human beings in exactly the same way. We've got our trials and tribulations, our good points, our bad points, in the same way as everybody does. There's good leadership, there's bad leadership, there's good people, there's bad people. It's exactly the same as everywhere else. So working with military people versus working with civilian people, actually, it's not really that different. The biggest challenge that I found was working for such a large organisation where if I wasn't on it, I had people that were able to back me up, and vice versa. There are people that I could back up, because when you back somebody else up, actually improves your well-being, because your feelings are you're making a difference and you're helping people. But also just having those people to bounce ideas off. So we've got this project, and being more creative and collaborative and things like that. From that kind of dynamic to working for myself, by myself, just in my flat, that was the hardest thing. What I found is I tended to spend an awful lot of money in the local coffee shops just so that I could have people around me. Not necessarily to speak to them, but just to have that noise and that hustle and bustle around me. I think that's the thing that I found the hardest.
Did you feel lonely when you started out?
Yeah.
So I think something that I found was that, very quickly you realise when you're like, I've got an idea, I'm going to go do this. And people are like, okay, cool. Yeah. And then you quickly realise that nobody really cares. And then you're sort of on your own until you're doing all right. And then everyone starts, are you coming back now, are you? Right, you're back on board.
Yeah.
How did you manage that? Do you still feel it now?
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna kind of world's smallest violin, all just for myself at the moment. But I'm a single man who lives by himself. My daughter is a grown-up; she's off at university. And although I've lived in Lincoln since 2018, it wasn't really until I left the RAF where I started developing a social circle, because I was for 3 years I was down in Buckinghamshire and just came back every other weekend to see my daughter. Other times I was deployed, and so I never really had that social circle. The unit that I was on when I was based in Lincolnshire, that was RAF Scampton, so obviously anybody Lincoln based knows what's going on with Scampton. It's closed down. The unit that I was on moved to Northumberland, so the friends that I had there are no longer in here, so I've had to kind of start develop that social circle from scratch, which, as I said, touch wood, it's growing. I've met some great people working in business, but at the beginning it was a hard slog and it was lonely.
Yeah, I could be wrong. Well, I'm always happy to be wrong. I don't know I think this would have happened to you anyway if you'd have left a normal job.
Yeah.
Because the time pressures, the general pressures and stresses of running a business throw away a lot of your old friends, because, all of a sudden, you say you can't go to the pub 4 times in a row. You're not getting invited on the 5th time.
Very true,
and that you'll find that the small things creep in. You haven't texted someone back in 2 weeks because you forgot about it and you've been working. So I think it would have probably happened to you anyway.
And you're absolutely right. And to be honest, it has, because just by you saying that there, I've just reminded me of a friend who lives just outside Lincoln, about 10 miles outside Lincoln. And we met up once or twice since I've left. But there's been a number of times where either I've tried to arrange something with him and he's been too busy because he's in the RAF still, he deploys and goes, or I've just been too busy. And those kind of tentative plans just don't happen. And it's actually been months.
Yeah.
The amount of times where I've thought to myself, I should get in touch with him.
Yeah.
But then, like you say, something creeps up on you.
I think it's not only connecting to starting a business. I think it's in generally when you're getting older and growing up. It's just like people growing up as well, and they
boring,
have their
isn't it?
own things.
When
to
we
do.
both get to your age, we'll know.
It's boring growing up, isn't it?
And I think because I don't think that having a business is lonely place. I know you always say that, but I don't think so, because when I start a business, it's probably the most where I meet so much people.
And I think I did find that. Now I don't, because, and this would be my kind of tip to, the business owners that are listening who do feel like that, because it's a really, really natural thing to feel, is just keep going to events and meeting people, making friends. So like, for instance, tomorrow, me and Ed are going to the pub with Bjorn. It's like the small things like that that just keep you grounded. And I think what you'll find is that you'll have way more in common with business owners than anybody else. So just speak to them. I know obviously like you're friends with Tom and things like that, but it's those kind of connections that keep you grounded. And
they really do, yeah.
And you find that as time moves on, you meet more and more people, you got more and more friends. I feel like right now I've got loads of friends, and I mean good friends as well, that understand where I am, and I can like talk to them about problems in my life. Most of those problems are work, and that work shit again, work's stressful. But you've just got so many places to turn that although I felt really lonely for months and months and months, I can't remember what it feels like. It was that long ago now.
That's good. That's good to hear.
If you know what I mean.
And I think you feel lonely when you decide to feel lonely, like really.
There is some real psychology. There is some real psychology behind that. One common thing is you can't control your thoughts. So those thoughts automatically come to your mind, but you can control the way that you think, and you can control the way that those thoughts make you feel. We are 100% responsible for the way that we think, feel, and act. But it takes a lot of practice, a lot of know-how to control that mindset, to be able to ask yourself the right kind of questions. When these dark thoughts are circling through your head and you can't control them, it does take a lot of practice and know-how to do it, but it is possible. You'll have seen, if you've been following my social media, there's lots of times that I talk about I've had my own dark places. In 2018 I was diagnosed with moderate depression and severe anxiety. I probably needed help about 15 years before I asked for it, but because I didn't know what I know now about how the mind works, about the neuroscience, about human psychology, you just allow those thoughts to go round and round. So something as simple as I'm under a bit of pressure with cash flow in the business, for example. So I'm going to say no to social events, and I'm probably going to say no to the next few. You're absolutely right. You're probably not going to there's going to come a point where you're not going to get invited anymore because you say no. But you're not saying no because you don't want to. You're saying no because in your mind you're being sensible and you're protecting your cash flow. But then those invites stop coming. So not only are you on your own or not socializing because you're being careful, you're then not socializing because you haven't got a choice. And it's very easy then for those dark thoughts to start settling and swirling. But it is absolutely possible for you to stop those. And that's something that was an absolute game changer, certainly for me and other people that I know that have been through similar sort of educational and development processes that I've been through. It's absolutely possible to stop that. And when you are able to stop that, reflect on what's going well, reflect on, rather than calling it a bad time, but something that you've learnt, then you can just start getting that well-being back up. But it is hard.
Yeah, I think so. I think
I think with experience it's getting easier. If you feel that like a couple times in your life you react easily, on that time. For example, if you have times when you have like really low on cash flow, you know what to do, how to get yourself out of it, not focus on that too much. And for example, you know how to find the people, find the network. It's easier. It's getting easier every time it's happening in life. So.
And let's face it, human beings, we get stuff wrong.
Yeah,
we make
for
mistakes.
Sure.
We get things wrong. And quite often it's very, very easy to kick ourselves when we get things wrong.
Yeah, it's normal.
But it's normal. And we have to give ourselves permission to get it wrong. So whether we're a solopreneur is the term, isn't it? Whether we're a business owner and we've got leadership responsibility and we get things wrong within our leadership, I'm a leadership development specialist. I guarantee that when I am in a position to employ people, I will get it wrong because I know how the mind works. I know kind of those instant actions, those impulsive, impatient moments that we have when we're under stress or under pressure and things like that. There are going to be times that I'm going to get it wrong, even though I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm talking about. As leaders, leadership is a hard thing to do. You are never going to be the perfect leader. That kind of aspiration, we just need to get that out of our heads. It's not going to happen. So we have to give ourselves permission to get it wrong. Because when we've got that permission, we can be kinder to ourselves when we do get it wrong. And when we're kinder to ourselves, actually it creates that energy where it's far easier then to be kinder to other people. And we have that humility and going up to and just saying sorry.
So your colleagues.
We've got the helicopters coming and raiding us now. Yeah.
What the hell?
You're gonna have people in black suits jumping through the window.
Yeah.
That'd be exciting, wouldn't it? We'd have a great podcast, great video for YouTube,
and all of that to deport me.
All of that, just to get them out.
It's so much easier when we're able to be kind to ourselves. That humility, and often when we have got it wrong, so long as we've got the attitude that we're trying our best for other people. Just going and saying, I'm sorry. It's such a powerful 2 words, I'm sorry. But so long as it's an environment where that person knows and trusts that you've got their best interests at heart, that you're trying your best, they'll forgive you. Now, if you're an absolute dickhead and you're constantly flashing at people and being nasty and you never apologise and you're kind of all about what you want, not what they need, then they're not going to forgive you. But generally speaking, they're probably not going to remain an employee for much longer either. And you're gonna constantly struggle. But if we've got that attitude where we're doing our best.
Yeah, I think it's so easy for a toxic environment to take root in a workplace when there is a manager or a leader like that and people leave. I think that's what business owners forget as well. It's like, well, the people will just leave.
Yeah.
It's like, well, they can't leave. No, they will just leave. Okay, we have a couple of minutes left. If you, just for the viewers really, can you just tell them, so what do you do on a day-to-day? How can you help their businesses? Who should get in touch with you and how? And if you kind of really just wrap it up for us and then we'll say our goodbyes.
Sure, thanks.
And feel free to talk at that person who lives in there.
Hello, tiny person in the camera. So I specialise with SMEs. So generally speaking, anyone between 25 and 100 people strong. And the reason is that that's kind of the size of organisation as I was used to in the Air Force. And what I'll do is I'll work with mid to senior level managers and help them just develop a bespoke strategy for developing their people so that they're as passionate and capable as if it were their own business. And that sounds like a far-fetched thing to want to have, but it's absolutely possible. I've got people that are achieving that, and the results that they're getting because their people are far more fulfilled and engaged. Their businesses are absolutely flying because of it.
Yeah, thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
It was a nice conversation, very insightful. And
it's an easy conversation as well.
Yeah.
You're really, and I
Everybody,
don't say this about anyone. I don't think. Yeah, I think you're a really interesting guy.
One thing about me is I hate public praise, so I'm just kind of wrapping myself up in a protective.
See, that's my leadership. Did you see
what
that? Just made him feel great.
You know that Andy was one of the first people I met in Lincoln.
Was I?
Yeah.
I didn't even know. I think I've told you this. I didn't even know that I was connected with you on Facebook. Facebook. Sorry,
we met
LinkedIn.
at some event in Mosaic. It was just some digital business event, and
the one where the pizzas are. Oh, they get pizza there.
No.
No.
Another one. Yeah, and yeah,
I
just
wasn't
like
in there.
Yeah, because
couple
you look
people was
completely
there.
different on your LinkedIn
Yeah.
profile to real
yeah,
life, so I
yeah,
didn't
it's
even know that we
catfish.
connected. Yeah,
God,
yeah.
he looks good on his LinkedIn, but my God, he
Handsome-
looks like a
handsome
sack
dad.
of shite
Yeah.
now, doesn't he?
we'll be there again.
But
So-
I appreciate you saying the kind words, and I've really enjoyed this as well. You two make this really easy to be interviewed and be chatted with.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I
Nice.
think we're getting there slowly. But yeah, thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you for watching this episode. Leave a comment, subscribe, leave like for us if you like this episode, and we'll see you next week in next episode. Bye.
There we go. And now we've got. So this is still staying in now. And how do you pronounce your surname? Nisevic.
Nisevic. Yeah,
Nisevic.
that's right.
Where's it from?
Serbia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people think Poland, but that's more of a ski
Yeah.
generally.
Yeah.
It's not exact, but generally, but yeah.
Yeah.
Vic is the kind of Balkan, old
Yeah.
Yugoslav.
Because there's a load of guys in like Vitches. I'm in like a sim racing league.
Okay.
So yeah, race with online autists, fellow autists. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.